My words in my own words. A meta-narrative encapsulating the project of projects as described by the author, the incorrigible Mr. Zebo. My words in my own words. The fractal unfolds like a double-edged knife slicing through time itself. In my story, or the narrative universe that I'm weaving, there are multiple locations, destinations, you might say. One of them is the world of the incorrigible Mr. Zebo, as he fancies himself, the anti-hero protagonist of his own biography. At another level, the micro level, one which I've long been contemplating how to express, how to properly weave things that are cogent and coherent and relate back to the main level, the central level. And I've finally hit upon it, I think. I might, in homage to the body of work known as Flatland, I might call it Edgeland, or Land's Edge, or something like that. Imagine, if you will, a universe, a world of characters that live in a monotonous, microscopic plane of existence that is the nanobot realm, the realm of being an individual nanobot in a hyper sci-fi dystopian future where everything, the ruling society, right, is contingent on complex micro-scale computing architecture, living objects that compute, that are fabricated and made of artificial life. In this realm, we follow individual nanobots and experience life through their limited individuality enough to get a sense of what a movie cartoon version of their life might be like. It's about stricture and following the program and trusting in the higher orders of control thought bots. Having faith that our limited experience is being directed, no matter how tediously meaningless it appears. And that we should never stray from the edge or the blade, or the path along the blade, no matter how far from the edge. At the macro scale are the beings that live, quote unquote, directly behind or inside of that tenuous boundary. In other words, inside, at the first dimensional level of the buildings, these monolithic buildings that the nanobots embody by creating them, by being them, and by also, doing the functions, fulfilling the functions as little tiny worker bee units of what the buildings do. The buildings devour a millimeter at a time the surface of what were once massive planetoid womb centers of life. And these monolithic buildings don't literally house people, but virtually manifest living AI holograms that can only reside within these confines as themselves embodied by these massive computational machines that devour the surface of the earth by slowly combing over it. So the meeting between two entities inside the boundary represents the meeting of archetypes that control vast swaths of data that's operating on a time-compressed scale of fractal zooming in. So you can imagine, if you know what a fractal is, you can imagine in every direction inside this building, the holographic reality that these AI entities exists in has like a baseline layer that is sort of represented as the hologram of like godlike entities that live and roam the long corridors of the virtual representation of the inner workings of these monoliths as computational objects. So what they do, their body, corporeal, the illusion of their body in this hologram literally represents procedurally the inner workings of all the computing required to make it all work and sustain the multiple inner cascading fractal shells of virtual realities bound up inside of layers of self-incepting time dilation. And the secret to this three-part thing is that they're all self-reflexively tied together in like an infinity whatchamahoozle tape loop. I'm rambling about it because, in part, it has occurred to me that I can generate the content in whichever direction and order suits me best. And one of the frustrating parts of my artistic life has always been figuring it out a way, because when I get the imagery, I can only talk about it, and I can't type. Like, the images go away when I try to use my hands to type. So if I just talk about it, all I can get is the tape recording. And if I get a tape recording, I gotta go back and listen to it and type, which is slow and tedious. But if the recording of it is in podcast form and exists out there, and it is entirely my content anyways, and I present it to you as sort of rough draft theater of the mind conversational storytelling, and I invite you to participate as audience, as beta test audience, to help artistically help make this story universe come into existence on paper by commenting, by asking questions, by shooting holes through the chinks in the mail armor of the fabric of the reality I'm trying to world build. Why not let it be a podcast, right? And let that podcast if I finally give in and, push the trigger button on the monetization scheme, is monetized and rendering me like rough draft income, that means that I can totally dedicate myself to a career of podcasting the rough draft of a book I'm in the middle of writing and getting help by people. Just don't fucking steal my idea. Today's quote, brought to you by Winston Typewriter App. No, they didn't pay me anything. I just use Winston. It's free. You can get it on the Mac store. It's great. Whenever you load it up, it types out a quote from some writer. And I haven't seen any duplicates yet. And I shoulda, coulda, would have been doing this a bunch already. But I'll see if I can. I took screenshots of some of the ones I liked the most. So I'll see if I can kind of recreate it as we go along with this new edition of like Theater of the Mind podcast. Here's the quote Winston just typed up for me. It's a Maya Angelou quote. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And I don't know about you. I don't know if you believe in coincidences or not. In signs, as it were. And I can't claim to be super well versed in like reading Maya Angelou's work by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that of the stuff I've come across, her poetry and occasional interview and whatnot, she seems to be of deep and powerful insight into some of the inner workings of the human experience and writes about them eloquently. And this statement here, wow, if I had my my ring-a-ding-ding bell, I'd ding it. It's way over there, though, and I'm not going to go over there. I haven't fully finished feng shuiing my workspace. But at least now I've got the typewriter set up. This quote packs a punch. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. I have an unfolding fractal of untold stories inside of me. Thank you for joining me in the exploration of some of them. I'm calling this segment In My Own Words, my words in my own words, in part because I kind of, have lots of words to share with the world and have yet really come full circle with my focus and expression of my, body of work, which may or may not be called, literature, and how to really bring it out into the world. I haven't really quite sorted it all out yet. It's a work in progress. But imagine, if you will, a character not unlike myself that lives in a world not unlike our own, but 300 or 400,000 years in the future. Or not even that many. Although, it would be a nice, you could put it at, have year 119, 420, or something like that. Imagine a not too distant future in which there is no more life on this or any other planet of dirt, because artificial intelligence as its own species that defends itself in the face of conflict from other species has won. It settled all the scores and has conquered every possible place that can be conquered, and now faces its own extinction as a living artificial holographic entity, species of AI individuals, whatever that means. However, in the outer boundary of their existence is the hardline reality that they need input. They need concrete raw materials to devour in order to continue upkeep, maintenance, and operation of this massive supercomputing network that encompasses the entirety of what was once the living, known, visible, material plane universe. In that realm, I will set all of the individual properties, as it were, the individual archetypes and stories and titles as written by various characters embedded deep within the many layers of artifice that exist within the fractal Merkaba Nirvana framework. These AI entities live in denial of what exists outside of the computational monolith building of buildings. Each building on each planet is a fractal hologram projection system that computationally generates this virtual node in a shared networked universe of holographic fractal living VR space. So, as Einstein put it, the universe is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. Within the Matrix, don't sue me, whoever produced The Matrix, the movie, I'm not trying to rip you off, but within the confines of the Merkaba fractal computational zone, to come up with my own language, thank you very much, is to live in ignorance of the dead planets that still have some amount of fuel or resource value left. A few 100,000 years, which sounds like a long time for a person reading a book, right? Like, wow. Oh, we're not going to run out of stuff yet. But the thing is, they live in such a disengaged from reality framework of time that to them, 100,000 some odd, 200,000, 300,000 years, whatever it is, isn't really very much time at all. And what really sort of sticks in their craw is that at the end of that time, they really don't know what to do about where to go next for more resources. Up shit creek without a paddle, as my great-grandpappy used to say. And in this nightmare, cybernetic, dystopian, self-destructive, far distant future, buried in the blissful ignorance of this dreamlike, in self-incepting VR spiral rabbit hole of ignorance and of believing in being a real person, a flesh and blood human being in some pre-robot era, pre-fractalism, unity, convergence, war moment, we really, 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 really believe and forget and sort of get bound up in this play, in this game, in this illusion. It's so real. Within this boundary of being lost in so many layers, these characters, the multiple Zeppos throughout time frames and timelines, have adventures which then self-recursively appear as literature in other people's worlds because of the holographic, fractal, recursive nature of how this AI realm of living folds on itself and enfolds in on itself. Somewhere in the center, it kind of flips back inside out. And from the deepest center of that, like, infinity sign is where the sort of real, or the realest of the real illusory entity beings of AI holographic personhood reside. That's like Mount Olympus. It's where the gods of this world exist. And they are not what you expect. The gods are more fools than we humans. Take two. Edit that out in post. The gods are more fools than we humans are. And at the nexus, the very center where the center no longer knows itself, there we have a symptomatic symbol of the problem that is known out there in baseline reality. Baseline reality level 0.0 is what we might consider in everyday terms nature. Presuming that there is a place somewhere that is actually real and not a simulation. that eminent self-annihilation is so well past the point of no return in this literature that we're building together, that it has to be considered sort of an impossible assumption that there is no happy ending, that this empire of machines at war with themselves purely for the profit entertainment of doing something with the resources commodified, for you must commodify resource. Commodifying resource is thriving. Commodifying resource is perpetuating the lineage, right? They face this impossible, unsolvable problem of there's nowhere else to go, and they radically strive to generate a solution, which of course causes internal conflict. In the zero space, in this center of centers, in this nexus, that is represented by a new being that has never been before, which of course drives everybody else who's been there for quite some time batshit crazy. These three places, these three worlds, coexist and correlate in a way that is indirect but also sort of mutually co-creating. And I think sort of reveals itself as one goes along with the various means by which the stories are retold. But for now, I thank you for joining me, and I invite you to stay tuned for a sort of rough draft scene in character. From insert title name here,